Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Temple City Council for April 7th, 2022. Please rise as Mayor Pro Tem Morales leads us in the invocation, followed by our pledge, which will be led by City Secretary Jana Llewellyn.
Join me, please. Merciful God, as we begin to enter Holy Week, we turn our hearts again to Jerusalem and to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Stir up within us the gift of faith, that we may not only praise you with our lips, but may follow you in the way of the cross. Thank you for sending your Son and paving the way for our lives to be set free through Jesus' death on the cross. Thank you for what the day stands for, which is the start of the journey towards the power of the cross, the victory of the resurrection, and the rich truth that Jesus truly is our King of Kings. As we say, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. We give you praise and honor for your ways, for righteousness and truth. We worship you, for you are holy and just. We will declare that your love stands firm forever and your love and kindness endures forever. May we bear witness to the mercy, miracles in our lives each day. Let us honor you by loving the people you place in our lives. Help us to submit to you and work diligently for you. Bless our lives with truth and love. Lead us to be with each one of us. This world is full of pain and trouble, conflict and hardship, suffering and injustice. But we know we have Jesus Christ, defender of death, and we know how it will end. Satan and his army and people like Pruden will fall. We will have work to do while we are still here, but we know we love the people in our lives well and serve you, our Savior, with all our hearts as we look forward to the eternity full of peace and love. We thank you for the military men and women of our country who choose to fight for freedom and for the liberties we now enjoy. Grant that we may not rest until all the people of this nation and world share the benefits of true freedom and accept you as Lord and Master. We thank you for our national and local leaders, our mayor, our city council, our city staff, and all those who work tirelessly for the benefit of others. And Father, we ask for wisdom and blessing to those who have willingly stepped up to make that decisions that will impact our nation, our communities, and our city. Lead us through these tough decisions, strengthen us each day for your purpose as we bring hope to those who are hurting. We pray that you would make our ways purposeful, and above all, we love you and we thank you. We ask all this in the name of your precious Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both very much. Now we've come to the time in our meeting where we accept public comments. Any citizens who desire to address the council on any matter may do so as long as they've signed up prior to this meeting. Public comments will be received during this time. We just ask that you please limit those comments to 3 minutes, and no discussion or final action will be taken by the city council. We had a couple of folks who signed up. First is Dr. Sandra Creech, if you would please.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Sandra Creech. I live at 504 Paseo del Plata in Temple, Texas. And I want to thank you for the opportunity for letting me speak. I'm talking about agenda item number 10, resolution 2022-0092R. I'm a bit confused about the information that I read in the agenda packet. It is for $225 million investment and 20 full-time jobs. And for that, the city will provide or reimburse $4,807,265 in 3 installments across 2024, 2025, and 2026. They also have agreed to provide 350,000 gallons a day of potable water to the company when it's available, and provide 830 gallons a day of raw water if available. In addition, 300,000 gallons a day for wastewater collection, and they are getting a tax abatement as well. The city is to pay $4,807,265 and receive a payment of $435,000 is reimbursement. And I know this is for capital improvements, infrastructure improvements. I saw the water lines and the waste lines that are going in. It seems to me that this is a very expensive undertaking for 20 jobs. So I want to know, in my mind, how is this a positive or a plus to the city? Thank you.
So I can't speak factually. I know that I read and we can't have a discussion, but I can speak factually to your question. That is an economic development prospect out in Synergy Park, which is out near Panda. They have agreed to build a $325 million data center for which the city of Temple will collect tax. And this is it's really a pretty standard agreement in that they will go in and put the infrastructure. You talked about the $4.8 million. They'll put the infrastructure in themselves to meet their timeline. And then the city of Temple, using tax revenue that they've paid the city of Temple once they're operational, will then pay them back in 3 annual installments. To address the water, they're also going to dig the well at their own expense. And then the city of Temple will own that well and will then charge them for the water that's pulled up through that well. You bet. You're more than welcome. Okay, next is Mary Miller.
Good evening. I'm Mary Miller. I live at 6115 Brewster Road, Temple, Texas, which is really outside the city limits. And I have a couple of questions on number 7 on your regular agenda. FY 2216 ZC, where they're going to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a rezoning from agricultural to planned development, single family and multiple family dwellings. I think it's 200 feet from my property. I have a map here, but I can't see it well enough to know where my property is on here. I have one question. What is that going to do to my taxes, real estate taxes? Has it going to affect it in any way? Secondly, is that property all east of the railroad track? I know where 1700 Moore's Mills Road is. And I know where I live on Brewster Road, but I don't know where that comes within 200 feet of my property. So that's my concern is. Number one, who's gonna pay my taxes if they go up?
Ms. Miller, that item is subject to a public hearing. And whenever we discuss that item, we'll be able to pull up, we have presentations for that. We can pull up a map and we can take a look at that. And at that point, if you'd like to come back up and speak and maybe point out to us where your place is in relation to the project site, we can further discuss then.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, moving on to item 3 is special recognition to read a proclamation recognizing April 2022 as Community Development Month in Temple. Ms. Glover, if you'll come up and maybe bring your team, whoever's here. We like that.
The dream team.
Nancy always says she does all this work by herself until she brings everyone up. Okay, it is my pleasure to read this proclamation to you and your team. Proclamation reads, whereas the City of Temple and its Housing and Community Development Department have partnered with nonprofit and neighborhood-based organizations to address neighborhood and housing needs. And whereas the City of Temple has clearly demonstrated the capacity to administer the CDBG program to identify, prioritize, and resolve pressing local challenges. And whereas the Temple CDBG program has provided more than $1 million in local support in fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22 including the direct support for small businesses and local citizens impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas the Housing and Community Development Department actively works to educate Temple citizens about the Fair Housing Act and encourage all residents to participate in planning and program implementation. Now therefore I, Timothy A. Davis, Mayor of the City of Temple, Texas, do hereby proclaim April 1st through April 30th, 2022 as Temple Community Development Month in the City of Temple, Texas, and I urge all citizens to join in recognizing the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Community Development Block Grant Program, and the City of Temple Housing and Community Development Department. In testimony whereof, I witness my hand on the seal of the City of Temple, Texas, on this 7th day of April, 2022. So congratulations, and thank you obviously for all the work that you do. Why don't you introduce your team and maybe tell us a little bit about what y'all do?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm actually going to let my team introduce themselves to you, just name and title. Hi, I'm Brittany Chopin, the grant manager. Governor, resource coordinator.
Kirby Phoebe, neighborhood revitalization manager.
Happy Lofton, administrative assistant. Charlie Foster, neighborhood navigator. We are your housing and community development team, and as the mayor said, we do have a lot of different programs that are funded through the CDBG program, but we also have a lot of other programs available as well. We focus specifically on housing related issues. So if anyone out there in the community has an issue with their home or their property that they need assistance with, we can definitely either help them through our programs, or we can connect them with a partner agency to provide them with that assistance. We also have a lot of agencies that we work with that provide other types of assistance as well. So if you know of anybody in the community that's struggling with anything at all, send them our way and we'll do what we can to try to find them some help. So that's what we love to do. It's our passion. And like I said, we're small, but we're mighty. And we definitely all have a heart for service and look forward to working with the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. We'll now move on to item 4, which is the consent agenda. All items that are listed under this section are to be considered routine by the city council and may be enacted in one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, any item may be removed from this agenda at the request of that council member and be considered separately. We discussed the consent agenda during our workshop earlier, and council, unless something has changed, it's my understanding that there are no items to be pulled. Is that correct? Very good. At this time, I'll entertain a motion on item number 4A through 4U.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 4A through 4U.
Second it.
Have a motion by Councilmember Long. We have a second by Councilmember Walker. Please cast your vote. Item 4 passes 5 votes to 0. Yes. The consent agenda passes 5 votes to 0. Moving on to item number 4 is consider adopting a resolution. Sorry, I'm misreading this. Sorry. Now we'll move on to the regular agenda. Item number 5 is the second and final reading to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a rezoning request with the development site plan approval for light industrial to planned development 2-family dwelling on 3.45 plus or minus acres, addressed as 505, 509, 605, 609 Turley Drive, in 4909, 4913, 205 Loop, and 5010 Williams Drive. Mr. Chandler.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And my understanding is that this one is just on public hearing for voting purposes. I would be happy to give the presentation again, but otherwise, your pleasure.
Very good. Council, anyone need the presentation? All right, very good. Then at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Do we need a public hearing? No? Sorry, I'm making a mess over here. Since there is no public hearing, I'll entertain a motion on item number 5.
I'll make a motion to approve item 5.
Second that motion.
We have a motion by Councilmember Walker. We have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Morales. Council, please cast the vote. Item 5 passes 4 yeses, 0 nos, and 1 abstention. Moving on to item 6 is the first reading in a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a rezoning request from agriculture to light industrial on 161.87 plus or minus acres located on the west side of Bob White Road, approximately 1,400 feet south of Tower Road, addressed as 2810 Bob White Road. Mr. Chandler.
All right, thank you, Mayor. And so the 161 plus acres, you can see here on the screen, it's just to the east of our original city limits. This is a recent voluntary annexation that essentially expands the Synergy Park business or industrial park. And as I mentioned, recently annexed, this was known as the Rowan Tract during that process. And also the 161 acres includes the item on the later agenda, the economic development agreement that was discussed with earlier, Temple Green Data Center. That's the 30 acres at the northeastern corner of this overall tract. And so here you can see what that 30 acres, approximately what that looks like, and as part of the 161 acres, but essentially this would expand Synergy Park, as mentioned before, with a consistent light industrial zoning designation. And so in terms of existing water and sewer, you can see in blue where the existing water lines are, and certainly sewer in green to the west. Sewer would be extended through the Lorraine Drive or Lorraine Avenue improvements. And so that is how sewer is going to be provided in the future. And they have gone vertical on this because, as you all know, this was recently annexed, and we have been working with them even prior to annexation so that they could begin going vertical on the data center. And then, of course, the economic development agreement is on tonight's agenda. And so we've been working closely with them to ensure that they meet our building codes and get permits once the annexation has been completed. So if you've been out there, you've seen the structure going vertical. And so just looking at the property and surrounding property, lots of ag. And in terms of public notification, one notice was sent to property owner, which of course happens to be the city of Temple to the west, adjacent in the city limits, and then 14 courtesy notices to property owners who are not in the city limits, but still giving them an opportunity, one, to be aware, and two, to comment. And we have not received any responses to this point. And so staff and planning and zoning at their March 7th meeting recommend approval. And so P&Z, that was a 6-0 vote. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I understand that the applicant is also on the virtual platform if you have questions for him.
Thank you. Counselor, any questions for Mr. Chandler or from the applicant? No. All right. There being none, I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. Just step to the podium and state your name and address for the record, or raise your hand on the virtual platform. Okay. There being no one that wishes to speak, I will close the public hearing and council entertain a motion on item 6.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we authorize a rezoning request as outlined by Mr. Chandler.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Williams and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Morales. Council, please cast your vote. Item 6 passes 5 votes to 0. Item 7 is the first reading in a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a rezoning from ag to planned development, single family 2 with 10% as multifamily dwelling and 10% 10% single family attached dwelling 2 on 214.684 plus or minus acres located east of Brewster Road and north of Moores Mill Road, addressed as 1700 Moores Mill Road in the city of Temple, Bell County, Texas. Mr. Chandler.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. And so here's the property as part of that rezoning. You can see Brewster Road is on the western boundary. Also to Mrs. Miller's question, the railroad, you can see that running northeast to southeast along our southwestern corner of this property. And so all of this is north or east of the railroad. And so it's, of course, it's a 214 acre tract, planned development that where they're proposing a mix of at least 80% single family, and it'd be single family 2 base zoning standards, a maximum of 10% of multifamily 2, and a maximum of 10% of single family attached 3, which are essentially townhomes. And so the location and exact acreage would be determined during the platting process, but there are some locational standards to ensure that those uses are located at appropriate sites within the overall site. And for instance, townhomes and apartments would need to front on a collector for a thoroughfare plan or an arterial. And the single family attached 3 or townhomes would be alley loaded to prevent conflicts between driveways and the public roads. And then also administrative review prior to the platting process, staff and the developer of the overall site plan once all that has been determined as to where the housing should be located and what the configuration is that they're proposing. And looking at the Thoroughfare and Trails master plan, you can see on the left, the Thoroughfare plan, a proposed community collector, which Brewster Road, essentially rerouting it to connect through City of Temple property, but ultimately to that major arterial shown in blue, which is the outer loop. Future land use is shown as industrial. And of course, what they're proposing is anything but that. And so, of course, that is not, we say partial compliance, but that is not compliant. However, this was a voluntary annexation that came forward several months ago. And so staff is supporting it because the residential uses are considered appropriate. The surrounding properties are residential and would also allow for future expansion, certainly of the infrastructure, particularly sewer. And so that is why staff primarily is supporting this, despite the fact that this is shown as future industrial. And so here you can see, much like the photos in the previous one, which is near the Synergy Park. Well, this area around our Enterprise Business Park is rural and residential estate in nature. 15 notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet. 3 returned in agreement, 2 of which were from the applicant, and then 1 in disagreement, and that is from a property owner. You can see really just on the other side of the railroad, the small D in red there, and property that is obviously within the city limits. So staff is recommending approval of this request, subject to the following conditions. And I'm not going to go through all these, but essentially 1 lays out the 3 different types of uses and the maximum of 10% for both multifamily and 10% for townhomes, with a minimum of 80% for single family residential detached. Under the single family criteria, allowing a minimum lot width of 45 feet. And under 3, the townhomes requiring them to be fronted on a neighborhood collector or above those road classifications per the thoroughfare plan. And then also the alley access for the townhomes. And then for multifamily, that once again, multifamily would have to be located along a community collector or greater, either community collector, minor arterial or major arterial. And then lastly, that all the development within the boundaries of the plan development must comply with other Unified Development Code requirements if not called out directly in this ordinance. And so planning and zoning recommended by a vote of 6-0 on their March 7th meeting, recommendation to include those conditions. And happy to answer any questions, and also from Ms. Miller as well, if she has additional questions. And actually, if you don't mind, I wanted to address one of her questions now. I'm thinking about it. If Ms. Miller, you asked about in Brewster Road, you live on Brewster Road. Well, this development would require that realignment of Brewster Road. And so providing better access from north of your property, which presumably you live north of this, to the future outer loop. And so that would be perhaps something that could benefit you and your family.
Do we know where Miss Miller lives yet?
Not sure.
Could you help us with that, the map? Can we go back to that
Sure.
map and see if,
So before we do that, council, do you have any questions for Mr. Chandler so we can open the public hearing?
sorry.
I do have one question. Go back to your list of requirements, Mr. Chandler.
Sure.
And obviously they're well thought out, but number 2, single family 2 design criteria to allow for 45-foot minimum lot width. What is the standard for SF2?
50 feet.
So this is bringing it in 5 foot, could
Correct.
be a 5 foot smaller.
Yes, sir. But the overall, the 5,000 square foot minimum lot size would still apply.
So basically you'd have it in.
Longer.
Long,
Yes, sir.
deeper. Okay,
Deeper,
thank you. I just
yes.
wondered what that was.
Anything else? All right, then at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. We just ask you step to the podium or raise your hand on the virtual platform. So Ms. Miller, if you would like to come back up, or if you have any additional questions, or Brian, I guess you could. What is? It's close, maybe. A little north of
Ma'am,
the,
Jason Deckman, our senior planner, is going to help you with that.
We spoke on the phone yesterday. He said 6115, correct? That is right here north of Morrisonville, before the railroad crossing. So you're right in here.
Oh,
Okay.
Your property backs up to the railroad.
okay.
So what is it? Maybe they show on the plot it's gonna be
Yeah.
more.
So the-
No,
And I may need to.
It's here,
podium so
right?
it's on the record.
probably so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm gonna go over there, just so this gets on the record.
So Jason Deckman, city planner, in case manager on this one, the question was, where does Miss Miller's property? Is it located against this case? So if you were to, do you have the cursor? I'll go to the map.
In this area.
So west of the railroad tracks.
Yes, sir. Her property is located west of the railroad tracks. The 200-foot notice would have started at the zoning boundary, went over the railroad tracks, and that's where your property would have been impacted by that 200-foot buffer.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Miller, thank you for coming in. Anyone else? Mr. Lytle?
Alan Lytle, 504 Paseo del Plata, Temple, Texas. Ms. Miller didn't ask, but I will. If I understood correctly, we're taking Brewster Road and running it through this new property. So her house is on the other end of Brewster Road. Does that mean that road, her access to her property is going to disappear? Your turn.
Mr. Lytle, that's a great question, and certainly we would work with the property owners to ensure that they continue to have public access to roads. And so that is yet to be determined, but certainly we would not want to cut off access to Ms. Miller and her neighbors to a public road.
Mayor, Ms. Miller also asked in the public comment section about the tax impact, and she does have the necessary tax exemptions filed, so there would be no tax bill impact for her.
I'll pay those then. Very good. But please remember that it was a city manager that said that, not the councilor matter.
Brian, could you just elaborate for Ms. Miller a little bit on what it means that you'll work with her and the other residents to be sure that they still have road access? What is that? How does that happen?
Sure. So once that the design has been established, conceptual, we would take a look at how that impacts the remainder of Brewster Road, which you presumably use, and if there are any remnants of Moore's Mill Road with the outer loop, to ensure that if that needs to stay public, for instance, then we would work with you all and certainly City Council to make sure that you all have access. This is something that, it's a great question. It's something that the city deals with on most of our road projects to ensure, working with the public works staff and the contract engineer, to ensure that you still have access to a public road. Sometimes that includes extending a driveway. But one way or another, we would work closely with you all during that process.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone on the virtual platform? No. If there's nothing else, then I will close this public hearing and entertain a motion on this item.
Here, I'll make a motion to approve item 7 as presented by Mr. Chandler.
Second it.
You have a motion by Councilmember Long and a second by Councilmember Walker. Please cast your vote. Item 7 passes 5 votes to 0. Item 8 is a first reading in a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a rezoning from single-family dwelling 3 planned development, which is SF3PD, to Office 1, which is O1, zoning district on approximately 0.783 plus or minus acres, legally described as lots 19 through 24, Block 6, Hilldale Estates, addressed as 10 North P Ridge Road. Mr. Chandler.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. And so here you can see the 0.783 acres referenced in the item description, just on the west side of North P Ridge Road, north of Adams, just to the east of West Temple Park. And so the applicant is proposing office development with the potential for a duplex on the rear part of the property. And so Office 1 this is located within the Hilldale Estates plan development, single family 3. And so you can see that there is quite a bit of yellow on both sides of this piece of property. However, when we look at the fact that P Ridge is a community collector, it's certainly prime for transition to non-residential uses. And so it is compliant per staff's recommendation. And then also looking at the future development plan, residential and neighborhood services, which, as the name suggests, encourages lower density residential and supporting non-residential. And so looking at the thoroughfare plan and trails, P Ridge, shown as orange, is a community collector. And looking at sidewalk connectivity and trail connectivity, there would be a minimum of a 5-foot sidewalk required adjacent to this property. Keep in mind that about 1,000 feet to the north would begin a CIP project to widen P Ridge, and that would include I believe, a 10-foot shared use path. And so as development occurs south of that, we'd have sidewalk connectivity. And that project is began at the end of this year or beginning of next year. And so looking at our thoroughfare plan and our comprehensive plan, just wanted to point out residential driveways are recommended to be prohibited on community collector. So as these properties transition, driveways for single, residential in which they could be backing into a busy street would be gradually eliminated. And certainly with this development, if there is a duplex built to the rear, well, they'd have to have that shared driveway with the office that is proposed as well. And so looking at the photos, you can see what the surrounding properties look like. The middle, that is a current existing house that is on that site. West Temple Community Park to the west. And then you can also see across the way, across P Ridge on the east side is part of the Westfield development. And so I just really wanted to point out Office 1 does allow duplexes and of course offices. And 14 notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet. 2 were returned in agreement and essentially represents all 4 lots owned by the applicant, but also a neighbor across P Ridge just immediately to the east. So staff recommends approval from Plan Development Single Family 3 to Office 1. And the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended 6-0 at their March 7th meeting for approval per staff recommendation. Happy to answer any questions.
Council, any questions for Mr. Chandler? I'll open the public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please do so. We ask you step to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Sandra Creech, 504 Paseo del Plata, Temple, Texas. I go down P Ridge, North P Ridge Road, about 2 or 3 times a week. And I will tell you that right now that road may as well be 1 lane at a time, period. Meaning if you see someone coming towards you, you may as well pull over into a driveway or a street and let them pass and then you go. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, down P Ridge Road, all the way down and into the subdivision, are cars lined up for picking up students at the school, which makes it even more impassable. You say this is starting to redo that this year? You're 2 years, you're 2 years too late. You're 2 years too late because people in and out of those big subdivisions, as well as that school, the line to get to pick up students. And I saw a bus try to get through that. And I just sat there and did this number with my knife, biting my nails going, he's not going to make it. He's not going to make it. He's not going to make it. And he's got a school bus full of kids. Folks, that needs to start tomorrow, please, if you can, and get that P Ridge Road widened enough to handle any construction that's going to happen and handle what's happening with the school. Thank you.
You, ma'am. Anyone else? Okay. There being no one else, and I'll close this public hearing and entertain a motion on item number 8.
I'll second it.
Have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Morales, a second by Councilmember Walker. Council, please cast your vote on item 8. There we go. Item 8 passes 5 votes to 0. Item 9 is to consider adopting a resolution approving the final plat of Smith Dove Hollow of 52.401 plus or minus acre, 18 lot, 1 block residential subdivision with developer requested exception to the UDC section 8.2.1.D.4 related to projection of streets, being part of the J.M. Harvey survey, abstract number 420, and the J.S. Patterson survey, abstract number 668, in the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the city of Temple, Bell County, Texas, located on the east side of FM 438 and south of Cottonwood Creek Road. Mr. Chandler.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. And just to sum up, really the only reason you all are seeing this is because the street projection requirement within our Unified Development Code of every 1,000 feet. We're actually allowing 1,500 feet per staff recommendation because this is in the ETJ that matches the county standard. So I'll show you what that means. And so here you can see on the left, Smith Dove Hollow, located along FM 438 in the far northeastern reaches of our extraterritorial jurisdiction. And then looking at the aerial map, you can see what that piece of property looks like. And so 52 plus acres with proposed lot sizes ranging from 1.17 acres to 7.18, and with proposed 18 residential lots. And so looking at the access and circulation, of course, they would take access from FM 438, which is a minor arterial on our thoroughfare plan, which is minimum 70 feet right of way, and they're far more than needed, 120 feet of existing right of way. And then also Bell County, as do we prohibit new residential driveways on an arterial. And so essentially what you see on the screen, all the different colored circles show shared cross access points. So the colors that of the lots follow the access shared driveways. And so that meets Bell County standards as they do our standards as well. And so when we look at the actual exception, as I mentioned, street projections are required every 1,000 feet. Bell County requires them every 1,500 feet. This is certainly a rural location, and these would be rural lots on septic, well more than an acre each. And so what is shown in the red circle would be a street projection to the east, which could allow a public road to project out to a future outer loop, eastern outer loop at that time. And so that does meet our standard, meets at least, well, Bell County standard. Ours would require that every 1,000 feet. And so Bell County did approve this on March 17th. Looking at the utilities, the water is provided by Little Elm Valley Water Supply Company. No hydrants are required. It does meet the conditions in the UDC for an ETJ waiver for fire hydrants. It is on septic, or would be on septic, and then park fees would still apply for each of those 18 dwelling units. Also looking at the thoroughfare plan, if you look at the yellow section there, that we would propose to realign a proposed minor arterial, the green one, green dashed one, I should say, so that it's a better and safer transition and intersection with FM 438. So that's what we're showing there. The Development Review Committee actually started this process in September. And so we've been working with them to make sure that it meets all the other codes and of course, Bell County's approval, which they did provide on March 14th. And our Development Review Committee then determined this to be filed or complete on the following day, March 15th. And so Planning and Zoning Commission also recommended approval at their March 7th meeting for that exception. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Council, any questions? Was. So there being no questions from council, thank you, Mr. Chandler, and I will entertain a vote on item number 9.
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of item number 9 as presented by Mr. Chandler.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Williams and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Morales. Council, please cast your vote. Item 9 passes 5 votes to 0. Item 10 reads to consider adopting a resolution authorizing an economic development agreement with Temple Green Data LLC to construct or cause the construction of and equip one or more new data centers and or facilities used to house and in which are operated computer systems and associated components, including accessory uses in the Temple Synergy Park. Ms. Myers.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a little bit of background on the project. As Mayor mentioned, Temple Green Data is developing a data center in Synergy Park. The property is on approximately a 33-acre site that is west of Bob White Road. Again, it is part of the parcel that you considered rezoning on earlier this evening. They also have the right to acquire the remainder of that tract, which is a little bit over 142 additional acres of land. And although they may develop that additional land in multiple phases extending over a period of years, this agreement and all of the parties' obligations and commitments under the proposed agreement are only applicable to the phase 1 development on that first 33 acres. Quick summary of the major terms of the agreement for Temple Green Data's obligations include the required investment of not less than $225 million in real and personal property improvements. They are required to create and maintain at least 20 new full-time jobs. They are required to commence the construction of the project no later than 12 months from the effective date of the agreement and complete construction of phase 1 improvements no later than 30 months from the commencement of construction. They're required to construct the Lorraine Drive grading and utility extension project, which includes a water line, wastewater line, wastewater lift station, mass grading, and drainage for an extension to Lorraine. A little bit different than was in the item's background description in your agenda packet that you received on Friday. But we continued to work with the company over the last few days to finalize this agreement. So what you see in blue is just anything that has a tweak to what was in the background memo. Here, the company may elect, but is not required to construct the Temple Synergy groundwater production well, which would include the construction of a well house, a water tank if needed, the electrical supply and piping from the pumps to the property line, and that would be for the production of non-potable water. The city, Temple Green Data does agree to reimburse the city the cost of designing the infrastructure improvements in the total amount of $434,000. The company is obligated to design and construct the project improvements in such a way that separates the discharge from the domestic wastewater from their process cooling water used in the data center in a way that would allow the city to elect, but not obligate us to collect that process cooling water instead of discharging that into the wastewater system. And they're also obligated under this proposed agreement to use commercially reasonable efforts in the design, construction, and operation of the project to minimize noise to adjacent properties to the greatest extent possible. The city's obligations that are included in the proposed agreement essentially is the reimbursement of the cost of designing and constructing the Lorraine Drive grading and utility extension project in a total not to exceed amount of $4,870,265, or the actual cost of the infrastructure improvements, whichever is less. That reimbursement would be paid over 3 equal annual installments. Additional terms include terms around our water and wastewater services. The city agrees to provide up to 350,000 gallons per day of potable water to Temple Green Data when that volume is available in the water system, in a way that would not affect our ability to maintain adequate fire protection, pressures, tank levels, or otherwise affect the safety and integrity of the public water system. The company does, through this agreement, acknowledge that this should be considered continuous and adequate service of potable water as required by the Texas Water Code for all purposes. In the event that some or all of the potable water capacity commitment is not available or expected to be available, we will promptly provide company notice of that fact. And upon receiving that notice, the company agrees to curtail their potable water usage as outlined in the notice. The agreement also does provide for the potential that the company may be required to purchase and install a mechanically limiting device to ensure that the water usage is effectively curtailed if needed. And that would be at the sole cost of the company. We've also proposed in the terms of the agreement is that upon request of the company, the city can provide additional gallons of potable water in excess of the water capacity commitment when that provision is in the best interest of the city, is available in the system, and doesn't adversely affect the safety of the system or our ability to provide service for other water system customers. Again, a slight change from what was in your background document. If the company elects to construct the Temple Synergy well, the city agrees to provide up to 830,000 gallons per day of raw water to the company, or the total amount of raw water that is produced and available each day from that well, whichever is less. The company does agree to use that raw water as the primary source of water for process cooling, and only use potable water for process cooling in the event that the available raw water is below 830 gallons per day, and only until such time that the city's available raw water is at or above 830,000 gallons per day. Again, one other change from what was in your background agreement. The city would agree under the terms of the proposed agreement to provide up to 500,000 gallons per day of wastewater collection and treatment services to the company. The background document had a 300,000 gallon number, and further analysis and conversations with the company, we would request that to be approved at 500,000 gallons per day. That's a summary of the agreement. I will be more than happy to answer any questions. I will note that the city staff has been working with the company on a tax abatement agreement as well. We've posted the required state notices, so that would come forward for your consideration at your May 4th city council meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Council, any questions on item 10? Seen it a number of times. So. Okay. All right. Very good. Then I will entertain a motion on item number 10.
I move for adoption of item number 10 as outlined by the city manager.
Second it.
Have a motion by Councilmember Williams and a second by Councilmember Walker. Council, please cast your vote. Item 10 passes 5 votes to 0. It is 6:17. Thank you all for attending, and